Joining us now on Kyle Brust Nortman is the doctor of football before the Homer Hour, Brian Balaga. Brian, you don't live under a rock. I'm sure you saw the news. The Packers have traded a 7th-round pick for Malik Willis. Your instant reaction?
Yeah, guys, good evening. Listen, I think we all saw the struggles of the backup QBs, not only through camp, but the preseason games. And again, like I said it last week, it's hard to truly judge a backup quarterback in a preseason game when starters aren't around him, which would be when he would get into a game in the regular season and real live action. If Jordan Love's shoelace came undone and he needed to go in, he'd be around the starters, and you don't really get to see that in preseason. So it is hard to judge and make a for sure claim on a backup QB in preseason, but these teams have to make a decision, and Goody did, and they went out and got a guy that has played. He was drafted, I think, in the 3rd or 4th round. Mm-hmm. He's shown that he can do some good things. He's a guy that, I remember he started for the Titans a little bit, I believe, if I remember correctly, watching him play. He likes to move around. He creates things, so he's a little bit of a different style than what Jordan Love is. Whether or not LaFleur can kind of mold that talent and get him to fit into kind of what Green Bay does quarterback-wise. Obviously, you can't change a guy 100%. You got to let him be himself. But to try to kind of fit what the quarterback position does in this offense will be fun to see if LaFleur can do it. But listen, it's low risk. It's a 7th-rounder pick they're giving up. I think it's a good move. And it makes, I think, probably the front office, obviously, and the coaching staff feel a little bit more secure about their backup position.
Brian, when it comes to the philosophy of backup quarterbacks, it feels like there's two different ones to me, whether it be a guy like Malik Willis, who's young, raw potential, or a guy who was another former Tennessee Titan like Ryan Tannehill, a guy that's been well-traveled around the league, almost like another coach out there, and who has a long time of starting history. If you were running a team, if you were Goody, which backup quarterback philosophy do you prefer? This one where the Packers go with youth and potential and ceiling, or a guy that's like a veteran that's been there, done that?
If it's me, I'm going with a guy like Tannehill. He's played a lot of football, right? And I understand it kind of tailed off at the end, hence why he doesn't have a gig right now. But he was very productive under the LaFleur system. He did a lot of good things. He was in Tennessee when LaFleur was the OC, very familiar with a scheme like this. And he's a guy that you can put in there, and he ain't going to lose you a game. And to me, that's the key when you look at backup quarterback play is if something were to happen and he needs to go in at halftime or in the 3rd quarter, will he lose us the game? Is he a guy that we can rely on to keep the offense on the field, move the ball, be a threat throwing it enough that defenses just can't pack the box and stop the run? And listen, it's not a knock on Willis at all. Again, I haven't watched him play. I've seen Tannehill play in Miami and Tennessee. I've seen him play a lot. So I understand the type of QB he is, but just from a veteran standpoint, a guy that prepares, he understands, especially someone that knows the system really well already. That would be my preference, but I'm not a general manager. So, and Goody's done a pretty good job. So I'll go with Goody on it and, trust what he's doing. But if it were me making the call, that would be it. But obviously there's finances involved in that decision as well, bringing in a veteran like him.
Now, Brian, I agree that Goody is a pretty good general manager. I think he's one of the top general managers in the NFL based off what he's been able to do and not rebuild but reload the Green Bay Packers in less than one season. But would Goody regret having Anders Carlson on this roster come September 6th?
Ooh, there's a tough question. It's hard to say with kickers. It really is. I don't think so. I think the pressure that is it official that they've released the other kicker? I don't even know. I haven't been checking.
I don't believe so yet.
Okay, so if they do decide to go that route, I'm optimistic that what happened to Carlson at the end of last season and the competition and kind of that little bit of fear that the front office has put into him over the offseason and training camp is enough to get him dialed in and ready to go for the season. So I'm going to say no. I think if he is the guy that Goody goes with, I think he's going to deliver the goods. Now, obviously, I think his leash is going to be a little bit shorter this year. I really do, and I get there's not kickers just floating around that you can count on during the season that you can just bring it off the street and rely on week in and week out. I get it. It's a very niche position, but I don't think he's going to have the same leeway he had last year. But I do think that Carlson has probably learned a lot from this offseason and this training camp that you gotta produce the goods when it counts, or there's going to be a quick exit for you.
Talking with Brian Balaga here on Kyle Brust and Nortman before he joins the Homer Hour from 5 to 6. Brian, we've talked a lot about the backup quarterback spot and obviously the kicker. And offensive line, we've talked about where the right guard's going to end up. Despite all of those, I don't want to say minor conversations, how would you put your mindset in terms of how this training camp went? Did you get everything you wanted to get out of training camp heading into week 1, which is already coming next Friday?
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Like the game's next week. Like it's absolutely wild, and it's Friday. It's a short week, really short week. But I think what they got accomplished this last week with Baltimore coming into town and the joint practice and then the way the game played out, I get it. It was the last preseason game, but it's direct correlation with how the team practices to how they go out and play. And we saw the night and day difference, how the team responded from the Denver week to this week. And that's a really good sign, right? That's a sign that the head coach is delivering a message to the team. The team is responding to that message. And that's something that this team did last year. We saw it last year, late last year, when everything was going against them and somehow they pulled out of it and made a nice run. And I'm not saying that they've had to get out of a hole in camp, but there were signs that the offense was up and down, and all of a sudden, Baltimore week comes around, really positive signs from that practice. Preseason game comes, they dominate that, and here we go. So I think all signs are pointing up, and they got what they needed out of this camp.